Congressman O'Rourke, one of the reasons I decided to run for chair is because of you and your message. Specifically regarding community engagement and coming back to your hometown when you maybe don't want to or have to. Coming back to your hometown and making a difference. And that's what I've tried to dedicate my life to, and a lot of that is due to your inspiration, sir. Thank you.
Children, you have this mic on? We have the mic on? Can you all hear me okay? All right, I'm getting thumbs up in the back. Let's hear it. It's a little bit better. Noah's going to work on some volume. Let's hear it for the county chairman. Who obviously is, beyond being a Democrat, is devoted to this community and the success of everyone in this room. And by that same token, let's have a round of applause for the GOP chairman, Mr. Posey, who's here as well. That means a lot to me. And I think it goes to show, you do not have to be here as a supporter of mine or someone who's going to vote for me in this next election. It does not matter. We say no me importa if you are a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. The fact that you are here, that you live in Victoria or the surrounding region, that you are a Texan, that you're an American, that you're a human being, that's what matters most to me right now at this moment. We're going to see each other. So I had the honor, as I walked in, of standing next to a veteran who has served this country in uniform. And look, there's some debate about who the greatest generation was. And we love everyone who served in any generation in our armed services, but the Vietnam era, who went off to fight a war that this country did not understand and was not widely supported, and were asked to do some really tough things, and who came back to communities where there were not ticker tape parades, there weren't slaps on the back, thank you for your service, can I buy that meal for you? Very often there was uninformed scorn and disregard and disrespect for those men and women who put their lives on the line for this country. And yet, nonetheless, they came back to Victoria, they came back to Texas, and they got after it. They worked those jobs, they raised their families, they went to schools just like this one because they wanted to contribute to the success and the strength of this country. Even out of uniform, they still serve. And I want all of us to think about that, because not a single one of them swore an oath to a political party or to a single person, even the president who might have been in power at the time. They swore to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. And this great democracy, which is the exception, not the rule in world history. We see this playing out right now, half a world away again. After World War II, we never thought again we'd see a land war in Europe, where an imperial power is invading a democracy right now to try to compel those citizens through violence and death and destruction to do their bidding, and to decide that they will accept this autocrat coming into their communities and into their country. What we have in America, the fact that we can come together in this room right now, and some of us won't agree on everything, some may disagree on everything, and yet we can still do that peacefully and freely and fairly choose those who will represent and serve us in the highest positions of power and public trust. That makes me so damn proud to be an American and to be served by veterans just like this man over here. So let's live up to that. This is our heritage. We have inherited the service and the sacrifice of those who have come before this and allowed this moment to exist right now. I want us to remember that, because tell me if you're my age, I'm going to be 50 this year. If you're a little bit older, if even you're younger, you've probably never seen a Texas or America this divided, this polarized, this fractured. People don't listen to one another. They certainly don't trust each other. They've chosen their own news sources, sometimes their own facts or versions of the facts. And we got to find a way to come together. And we have to begin with this. We're not going to agree on everything. No two people ever will. I've been married for 17 years, so I know that. I'm reminded of that on a daily basis. But we can probably get around the big things that matter most to us and decide that we're not going to allow the perfect to become the enemy of the good. In other words, I may not get my ideal in every negotiation or conversation or debate or issue that we are discussing, but I think I can find enough common ground with anyone here to advance our agenda. And the things that we want, or at least that I'm campaigning for, are not going to surprise you. They're not out of left field, and they certainly aren't out of right field either. These are things that most of us, I hope, can get behind. Like, I want to make sure that the best jobs that are being created anywhere in America are found right here in Texas. And that if you're willing to work, and you work full time, you shouldn't have to work a second or a third job to make ends meet. 4 out of 10 working Texans right now don't make a living wage. That means that they're on public assistance. You as a taxpayer are supporting their employer because their employer may be paying them $7.25 or $8 or $9 an hour. Nobody can feed their kids, put a roof over their head, have something left over on the weekend of $7.25 an hour. It's tough even on $9 an hour. How about a living wage for everyone working in the state of Texas? We all want that. We can all agree on that. Here's another one. I want to make sure that we have the best system of public education in America, right? And look, I know the engineers, the contractors, the architects in the room will say, well, we got to build more school buildings and make them really fancy and expensive if you can. I know the folks in the IT industry are going to say, well, we need more computer systems and remote distance learning and the latest computers and information technology. That stuff is good too. I want to have that for our kids. And I've got a kiddo in public high school, one in public middle school, and one in public elementary school, okay? It takes us about an hour to drop all of them off in the morning. So I want them to have the best stuff, the greatest gear, to be in the nicest buildings. But that thing, that person that's really indispensable to world-class public education is that educator who's in front of them in the classroom. So that teacher, that counselor, that librarian, that speech-language pathologist, that nurse, that person who drives the school bus or is there to serve the meal in the cafeteria, all of them, and you know this because some of you are those people. Not only are you providing world-class instruction to those kids, making sure that they can read and write and add up at the end of the day or at the end of their academic career, but after 2 years of COVID, where some of these kids have lost their grandparent or grandparents, where their folks may have lost their jobs, where they're no longer living in the house that they were 2 years ago because their family cannot afford the rent or the mortgage note, you're there to literally keep those kids going. In some cases, to keep them alive, as we see a spate of young people considering taking their own lives, and in some cases successfully doing that in this state right now. Very often, it is the teacher in front of that classroom who is the life or death difference for that kid. But in this state, for some reason, search me for it, I don't know what it is, we underpay those educators by $7,500 on average against the national educator in every other state in this country. These teachers are working 2 jobs to make ends meet right now. I cannot tell you how often I've been in a restaurant where every now and then I need a cold beer at the end of the day. I'm in a bar, and that bartender says, I hear you talking about teachers who work 2 jobs. I tend bar right now to support my habit of teaching your kids in kindergarten. Now, how messed up is that? Shouldn't we be paying her enough so that her only focus is the kid in front of her? What if we raise teacher pay in the state of Texas so that no teachers work in a second job? Every teacher has the resources they need. They feel the respect that all of us have for them. And we don't just say it, we show it, we pay them. And those retired teachers who work 20, 30 years in the classroom, they have not seen a cost of living adjustment since 2004. Imagine how much prices have gone up since 2004. Imagine how much prices have gone up since 2021. And we are paying the same thing from the teacher retirement system here in the state of Texas. It's about time that there's an annual cost of living adjustment for every retired teacher in this state. And for those kids who have already been through so much, lost 2 years of classroom instruction. In some cases, we've lost track of who these kids are and where they might be right now. These teachers who've labored under extraordinary pressure. If you watched one of your young kids, and my child was in 3rd grade when the pandemic started, one of these kids on Zoom with 30 other kids, and that teacher is trying to wrestle these cats, herd these little babies on that Zoom screen, you know what they've gone through. Why add more pressure or more stress to their lives right now? This year, at a minimum, we should cancel the STAR test so that there's no more high pressure or high stakes in the lives of those kids. World-class public education, we can all agree on. It makes all the sense in the world. Here's the last big idea that I want to lay on you. And again, this is not an idea for Democrats. It's not one for Republicans. I think it reflects a pretty common Texas value. We are one of the last states in the nation not to have expanded Medicaid. Now, all of our bordering states, Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, have all done that, and most of them had Republican governors at the time, because this isn't a partisan issue. These are your tax dollars. You paid them into the federal government in income taxes, and then the federal government wanted to give them back to us in expansion of Medicaid. They were going to pay 90 cents on the dollar for expanded care so that fewer people would be dying of diabetes or curable cancer or the flu in the year of our Lord 2022, which happens all the time in Texas because we're the least insured state in the country today. $100 billion, imagine what that looks like, is piled up somewhere, or more likely than not, it has gone to other states that could have come to us over the last 10 years. If we would just take yes for an answer and accept that expansion, we would not only connect more people with care, hire more providers into underserved communities that right now lack a doctor, like the rural communities that surround Victoria and around my hometown of El Paso. We would also, ladies and gentlemen, be able to lower your property tax bill. Because when that person with diabetes, who could not afford $1,200 a month in some cases for insulin, finally gets so damn sick that they can't take it anymore, and they're able to take themselves to an ER and they go in, the outcome in their care is not going to be great because we've waited so long. We've delayed and functionally denied the health care that should be theirs as a right, and it's going to be far more expensive than it would have been otherwise as their bodies begin to fail them. $30,000, $60,000, $150,000, it doesn't matter. They don't have a dime to their name, but it's not like those bills automatically disappear or evaporate. Someone's going to have to pay, and that someone is you. You'll pay higher property tax bills into your local hospital district, or higher rates for your insurer if you're lucky enough to have insurance in the first place. So I'm just here to tell you that as governor, I want to make sure that we expand Medicaid so we bring those dollars into our communities, connect people with care, and lower our property tax bills. Those three things. When they say, when you go home and later and your roommate or your partner or your parent or your colleague or your classmate says, what is this O'Rourke guy all about? I hear Abbott saying he wants to turn Texas into Venezuela, that he's a socialist, that this is an extremist agenda, they're gonna California our Texas. Say, look, I showed up and I heard it right from his lips. He wants to create great jobs, ensure that we have world-class schools, and expand healthcare so everyone can see a doctor. Now, there's a very good chance that I'll be working with a Republican majority legislature as your governor. And I've intentionally chosen these ideas where we have the greatest common ground, where we have the greatest urgency from our fellow Texans, and where I think we can move more quickly than on any other issue. And to show you that I've got some skin in this, and I've done this before, when I served in Congress for 6 years, every single day I was on the House Veterans Affairs Committee. I signed up for that. I chose it. It was regarded by most of my colleagues as the basement to which you're sent if you've been punished by party leadership, because you can't raise money on the House Veterans Affairs Committee. There's no political action committees. There's no billionaires that care what happens to the veterans in our country, with some exceptions. You're not going to raise money or advance your career or move up the ladder. But it so happens that I come from a community, El Paso, that has more veterans almost than any other community per capita in the nation. And we had some of the longest wait times for those veterans to get in to see a mental health care provider. And in a pandemic of suicide amongst those veterans, some veterans were taking their lives at a frightening rate, including those who had an other than honorable discharge. So I signed up, I wanted to be on that committee. We're gonna turn around the VA in El Paso, and we're gonna try to turn it around nationally. The problem, I was a Democrat in an institution controlled by Republicans, and the president of the country at the time happened to be a Republican as well, Donald J. Trump. You might have remembered him from the last 4 years. But listen, could I come back to a room like this, to a town hall with veterans and say, hey, would love to help you all, but I'm just a poor Democrat in an institution controlled by Republicans, and I can't do anything with this guy, Donald Trump. I don't like him, he doesn't like me, and so just wait till we beat him, and then I'll do something for you. I would have been laughed out of the room. They would have elected someone else to replace me, as they should have if I had done that. So what I did is we wrote a piece of legislation called the Honor Our Commitment Act to ensure that veterans did not have any obstacles in accessing mental health care. But it was as good as the paper it was written on if I couldn't get that sucker passed. So we found those Republicans with whom we could find some common ground on this issue, and they didn't accept it as written. They said, Beto, I like the idea, but I don't know about the means that you have to pay for it. And some of the exclusions here, I want to change those because they better match my constituents in Colorado. That was a Republican I was working with. We made those changes. We found that compromise, which I know is a 4-letter word in DC and along the national political spectrum, hopefully not here in Victoria. And we got it passed, 435-0 in the House. We got it passed in the Senate. And Donald J. Trump, the one guy with whom I agree on almost nothing, signed that legislation into law. That's how we get things done when we find the common ground. Listen, I'll close with this. I'll close with this. I know, and then we want to take your questions. So if you have a question, if you have an idea, we're going to circulate another microphone through the room, and I'm looking forward to hearing you. But a couple of things. This is not my first time in Victoria, Texas. In fact, I was here as Hurricane Harvey was bearing down on the community. I came back after Hurricane Harvey hit, and I remember visiting with many of you. I remember going to the hospital. I remember meeting with members of local law enforcement who literally on a daily basis, on a nightly basis, on 24-hour shifts were saving the lives of the people in this community. I walked into a restaurant, which I was trying to remember the name of it earlier. It was the one restaurant that we could find open. And Gorilla Gourmet, that's exactly right. That's where we were. We walked into that place, and there was a line that went out the place, around the block, and we waited in that line to get food just like everybody else was getting food, and I felt a little ashamed. Here I am coming from El Paso, taking food that should belong to the people here in Victoria. But they didn't mind us being from another community or another county. And when I got to the counter, I said, what do we owe you? And they said, it's free or it's whatever you can pay to chip in to make sure we have the resources to help other people out. And the food that they were cooking was from the ingredients that had been contributed by the community. You all showed up, and you showed up with whatever you had in your pantry or your refrigerator or in your garage, and you made sure that it could be distributed to the community. When I came back in 2018, I learned that the Muslim Center had been burned down by an arsonist in this community. The Muslim Center, which had cost $500,000 to build, was destroyed. And the leaders of the Muslim Center appealed to the community, not all of whom are Muslims here in Victoria, and said, would you help us to rebuild? And the community said, yes, we will. And they contributed more than $1.5 million to restore it. It was $500,000 originally, $1.5 million raised in the local community. And then when the lights went out, last February, when in the energy capital of North America, we couldn't keep the power going to our homes, and the heat stopped running, and our pipes froze, and the water stopped flowing as well. And people were scared, they were hungry because they couldn't eat, they were cold, they were worried if they were going to make it, and we know that hundreds of our fellow Texans did not make it in those days. Because the power didn't fail us just for a couple of hours, it failed us for a lot longer than that. We made it through, not due to our junior senator, he was busy at the Ritz-Carlton in Cancun, Mexico. We made it through not because of the guy in the highest position in this state. He was on cable TV blaming windmills and the Green New Deal. We made it through not by the people in power or even in elected office, and maybe some exceptions for these local office holders who I'm sure were on the ground helping each other out, but it was the community. It was neighbor knocking on neighbor's door, never asking, hey, first, are you a Republican or a Democrat? Are you a Muslim? Are you a Jew? Are you an immigrant? Or have you been here for 4 generations? Who gives a shit? I just want to make sure that you're okay. I just want to make sure that you're all right. And that's how Victoria got through. That's how Texas got through that disaster. That's how we're going to come through right now. I'm asking for your help. And there are some who are going to want to join this campaign. And we have a chance to get Texas on the right track, to focus on jobs, world-class schools, the ability to see a doctor, ensuring that we can keep the lights on going forward. These should be the basics, but we've ignored them as we've been pitted against one another and focused on the fringe, extreme, culture war stuff of this last legislative session. If you want to do this and if you want to be part of it, I'm asking you to sign up today. We've got some volunteers in the room who'd be happy to take your name and your email address and your cell phone. You can also go to betofortexas.com and sign up there, and we'll put you to work, knocking on doors, making phone calls, reaching out to people in your own words, from your own heart. You don't have to say what I just said. You tell them why this election is so important. This democracy is worth saving, given those who fought to defend it and protect it. We're going to make sure that we do right by one another. We're going to make sure that we do right by the generations that follow us. And I'm confident that that leadership is here in this room right now in Victoria. Thank you all for being with us. We're really looking forward to the conversation ahead. Thank you all. Bless us. Cynthia, you want to raise your hand? So this is my colleague, Cynthia Cano, a proud graduate of the University of Texas at El Paso, Go Miners, Andrews High School before that, and has a microphone. And if you would like to ask a question, make a comment, share an idea, I want to make sure that we have a chance to listen to you. Not everyone's going to agree. That is okay. That's cool. That's democracy. Let's just make sure that we are civil with one another and kind to each other and able to hear each other out. So that's the only ground rule we have for the conversation. Okay.
Thank you. Hi.
Is this Tiara?
This is Sarah.
Oh, sorry. Tiara, that's right. Good to see you. Thank you for introducing us. Appreciate it.
Okay, so my question for you, and thank you for joining us today, is the oil and gas industry offers high-paying jobs to Texans. Often people with no education can earn 6 figures. College students can cover books or offset tuition with a single summer job and enter lucrative careers after graduation. As we move to renewable energy sources in the future, what steps would your administration take to ensure Texans have good, secure jobs?
Great question. This one's been on my mind, probably yours as well, not just for the duration of this campaign, but over the last few weeks as we've seen this invasion by Russia of Ukraine. And one of the principal issues at stake is energy in the world. And we know that Europe, including Ukraine, depend on Russia for their energy supply. So they've got to keep the lights on and the heat running and the water flowing in their homes as well. But right now they're dependent upon this superpower that is trying to use military force to compel a democracy to do its bidding. What if, right here in Texas, as we fuel our own energy independence, we're producing the gas and oil that powers this country and frees us from having to go to wars in Iraq or Kuwait or Saudi Arabia. We don't have to depend on any other part of the world, including Russia. I think we just signed an executive order from the president that we are shutting off the 10% of our energy supplies that come from that country. The only way America can do that is Texas. It's the oil and gas worker, it's the entrepreneur, it's the innovator, it's the ingenuity that has found and extracted these resources and is safely getting them to market. So first things first, let's make sure that we safeguard that. And if possible, continue to not only provide for our own needs, but maybe supply some of those, including LNG, for Europe, so they are less dependent and maybe ultimately independent of Russia. But to that, I want to expand the kinds of energy that we are known for around the world. I want to make sure that it is wind. We're the leader in America right now in wind production. But let's add to that solar, geothermal, and there's a pretty close connection between the skills needed in geothermal and the skills used in oil and gas. That's great because we're the leader in oil and gas. Let's transfer some of those skills as we protect those oil and gas jobs. And then what about hydrogen? One of the energy sources of the future. Some country is going to lead the hydrogen revolution, and the jobs and the investment and the wealth that comes with it. Why not America, and why not have that headquartered here in Texas? So we are the energy leader of the world today. As governor, I'm going to make sure that we expand that lead going forward while we meet the challenges that we have from climate change and confront that before it's too late by ensuring that we expand those other energy resources as fast as we can. Thank you for asking the question. Appreciate it.
All right, if you raise your hand, I will go to you.
Roberto, buenos dias.
Buenos dias.
My name is Maclovio Perez. I'm running for Congress in District 27. I'm up against Michael Cloud in November. I'm a big fan of this young man. I've watched you since you got started, and we know that you have the most important thing, humanity, to lead Texas. And we certainly want to make Texas great again, don't we? As you know, as I just went through it, for every one Democrat that voted in the primary, we had 2 Republicans show up. And that is a big bridge to cross. And I'm relying on you because of your statewide appeal and reputation. But what do you think it's going to take to get everybody out this coming November?
You know, a couple of things on this. We saw about 800,000 more Republican votes cast in their primary than Democratic votes cast in our primary. Really, all of our primaries, because we have Republicans and Democrats here in the room. Should that concern us? Well, you have far more competitive statewide races on the Republican side, right? A very vigorously contested contest for Attorney General, a surprisingly competitive governor's race. While I got 92% in my primary, Greg Abbott only got 67% in his. They spent a lot of millions of dollars. We spent almost zero relative to that, at least on TV or advertising or reaching voters. So I think some of that explains it. And also, primary performance is not a predictor of how we'll do in the general. In 2020, there were more Democratic voters in the primary than there were Republicans, and yet there were more Republican voters at the end of the day because Donald Trump won this state by 6 points in November. But your question is, what do we do between now and November to make up this gap and to make sure that we're reaching these voters? Well, one is meeting with people where they are, like we're doing right now. Victoria so often is overlooked or taken for granted or counted out altogether by statewide officials and statewide candidates. We keep coming back to Victoria because we know just how important this community and this county is. And we're listening to the people in Victoria to make sure that we're reflecting their priorities. That brings more voters out in Victoria and every community that we visit. But there's this number that I just cannot get my head around. I want to share it with you. See if you can. 7 million Texans were eligible to vote in 2020. That was a year, remember, that Joe Biden and Donald Trump faced off in the most consequential presidential election in our lifetimes. Probably you'd have to go back to 1864 to find another presidential election that mattered as much as this one. 7 million Texans who were eligible to vote did not cast a ballot. I don't know about you, but for me, the choice was pretty clear. Whoever you ended up choosing, right? And we don't need to go backwards and litigate the past, but you chose who you chose because it was pretty clear that they were going to do a better job than the other guy. 7 million didn't feel that way, or were suppressed or intimidated from voting at all, or were working those 2 or 3 jobs and didn't have an hour in some cases in some communities to stand in line in order to vote. Or this state makes it harder and more confusing to register or to cast a ballot than any other, and they were intimidated. They couldn't figure it out. I don't blame them. Might be hard for some people. But the number one reason given when people went back to their doors and said, hey, why didn't you vote in this last election? They say, because no one knocked on my door and asked me to participate or explained how this thing worked or told me where my nearest early voting location was. I've never done this before, Beto. I need somebody to help explain this to me. So the way that we meet that challenge is we join the more than 54,000 people who have already signed up in this campaign as volunteers, who are willing to pick up a clipboard and knock on the doors of those 7 million voters. and share with them in their own words why this election is so important. We can't do it with slick TV ads. I guarantee you Abbott's going to have more money than we will. He'll air more of those ads. They may even be better. I don't know. We're not going to do it through mailers or the cute things that we post on social media or this latest dance that I want to try on you on TikTok. Just wait till you see it. You're going to love it, but it's not going to win your vote. What's going to win your vote is another human being showing up at your door and eyeball to eyeball, face to face, making that connection. That is so powerful. Everything else is just interference and static as far as I'm concerned in our election. So if we want to win this, and I know you do because you're one of these candidates, we got to show up and we got to meet people where they are and ask them to vote. Anybody want to join us in doing that? All right, I got a few takers. Connell, thank you.
All right, here we go.
Hi, Congressman O'Rourke. My name is Neha. Thank you so much for coming to Victoria today. I had a question. In your previous campaigns, you had made remarks regarding the Second Amendment, and although I fully agree with what you have to say, many Texans may not. So how do you plan to address that problem in your campaign?
Like most people in this room, and maybe everyone in this room, I grew up with firearms in our household. And in fact, I was taught to shoot by my Uncle Raymond, who was a sheriff's deputy. He was a captain at the El Paso County Jail, and he won the Sharpshooters Award. He was really proud of that. And so he insisted on being the one to teach me and my two sisters how to shoot. But in addition to focusing on our marksmanship, he also taught us the responsibility of owning that firearm. Where you point it, where you don't point it, how you handle it, when you use it, the circumstances under which it's okay to handle that gun. Now that's almost all of us. We have this long, proud tradition of responsible gun ownership in the state of Texas, for self-defense, for collection, for hunting. What is not part of our tradition, and is at the extreme of what any of us would have ever expected, is this bill that the governor signed into law last year that allows any Texan to carry a loaded gun in public, without a background check, without any vetting, without any training whatsoever. There's a Vietnam-era veteran actually who lives by my house who, when I said that I don't think any Texan should have an AR-15 or an AK-47, because someone used an AK-47 in my hometown to slaughter 23 people, saying that he was gonna stop the Hispanic invasion of Texas. And the more I learned and read about AR-15s and AK-47s and understood they were designed for the express purpose of killing human beings on a battlefield. And that's great, use them on the battlefield. Send them all to Ukraine. We don't need them in our communities, in our stores, in our movie theaters, in our churches. When I said that, there were some people in this great democracy who disagreed with me. And I've got to respect their point of view. And one of them was this Vietnam-era veteran who lives next to me. He said, hey, Beto, I have an AR-15 in my house. And I'm one of these responsible gun owners that you talk about. And I want you to hear my perspective. And I did. We had a great conversation. But at the end of it, he said, you know what worries me more than the comment you made, Beto, is the fact that I am a firearms instructor. And in our old license to carry program, before you could get that gun and carry it in public, you had to have some training. And there were people who walked into my shop who didn't know which end of the gun the bullet came out of. There were 35,000 licenses to carry a firearm that were denied over the last 5 years because law enforcement deemed those people too dangerous to themselves or to the people around them. They shouldn't be armed and those guns shouldn't be loaded. Those 35,000 people and the tens of thousands more who knew better than to ever apply it because they wouldn't have passed a background check, they all have guns on our streets right now. We are seeing a spike in gun violence in Texas since then. More cops who have among the toughest, most important, most dangerous jobs we can ask anybody to undertake, who put their lives on the line each and every day. More cops have been shot down in the state of Texas than any other state. That's why police and sheriff's departments begged the governor not to sign this into law. So our position is that we're gonna defend the Second Amendment, but we're also gonna do a much better job of protecting the lives of our fellow Texans by getting back to that long, proud tradition of responsible gun ownership. Thank you for asking the question. Appreciate it.
I don't think he is.
Hey Beto, my name's Ashley. I, like you, am a parent. I have a junior in high school and a 7th grader. And And so this question kind of pertains to your education question. My 7th grader has had a lot of problems going back to school. She has developed a lot of anxiety and depression regarding, being afraid to go out, being socially anxious. And so I would like to hear what you have to say about addressing the access to mental health care for all Texans, but especially for school kids.
Thank you for raising that. We were in a meeting not unlike this one in Laredo recently, and met this extraordinary 8th grade middle school teacher named Maxine. And as she was making the case to cancel the STAR test this year, which I found persuasive and was persuaded by, she said, I'm trying to keep my kids alive right now. And the challenges they've been through over these last 2 years, the challenges they came in with in many cases prior to the pandemic and the recession and everything that we're going through right now, they're not getting the help that they need. And yes, we want to focus on their ability to do well on these tests, and we want them to go to college or to be career ready at the age of 18, but we also want to make sure that they are okay and that they're getting the help and the treatment and the care that they need. We rank dead last, or as close to dead last as you can get, in terms of access for young people to mental health care. And to put a point on it, the largest provider of mental health care services in this state is the county jail system right now. It is so bad that some people, and I hear this all over Texas, I was just in East Texas where we have some of the worst rates of mental health care access. People will tell me that they've got family members who get arrested on purpose. It's the one place that their schizophrenia or their bipolar disorder will get treated, or at least they'll have a roof over their head and a bed to sleep on. They are uninsured, and through no fault of their own, they're dealing with this right now. And it costs all of us, what is it, 120, 130 bucks a night to house them in that jail. And I can only imagine what their outcomes are if that's their best course of treatment. The largest inpatient facility in Texas is the Harris County Jail in Houston, Texas, not too far from here. So you ask, what are we going to do about this? We absolutely have to prioritize access to mental health care. It begins with the expansion of Medicaid, but to be clear, it can't stop there. We're going to have to ask of this state to make that investment in the most vulnerable among us, those who are battling with mental health care issues right now, or the youngest who at the age of 4 or 5 or 7 or 8 needs somebody to help diagnose what the challenge is in the first place and to provide the treatment and the therapy ongoing so that they're ready to learn, just like every other child in that classroom. And you may say, look, Beto, this is an expensive proposition. And it may be, but it's a lot less expensive than the way that we pay for it right now. And if there is any kind of morality in the state, and I know there is, I mean, look at everybody around us, we'll find a way to get this done. If we could find $3 billion to send members of the state guard to the border, if we could build sections of border wall, if we can target the parents of transgender children with state-sponsored investigations, we can actually find the resources to do the real things that are really going to help people right now. And that's what I want to encourage you to focus on. Thanks for asking.
Johnson. I am a mother of a child that was murdered on school grounds as being bullied, and I'm asking all parents that I have been pulling for this, I have shown it in the newspapers, to help pass a law to fight this law, because bullying is not getting easy. It is getting worse. And the thing is, I don't want you or any parent to come up short from the kitchen table. I am a 30-year veteran of bullying. It has been hid in Victoria and pulled back. It has been a hush-hush. Now I'm out to beg you parents to help me fight this bill.
Thank you for being here and having the courage to share this. And I know everyone feels the way I do. We are sorry for your loss. We are grateful to you that you're trying to prevent future loss from other families. And I think the message is heard loud and clear to us as parents to do our job. First and foremost, we have that personal responsibility with our children, and as those who may be in positions of trust, where we can actually sign legislation or propose legislation or direct resources against this challenge, I want to make sure that we heed your call, follow your guidance, and do the right thing. We will save lives in the process.
But not only for Texas, I'm talking about around the United States where families are really hurting because of the bullying and their kids.
Message heard. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Hold on, wait till you have a mic. I'll get to you. This young lady had her hand up.
When you become governor, what will you do? What will you do to push the legalization of marijuana in the state of Texas?
This is, the question is, what will I do? Because I think you know that I favor legalizing marijuana in the state of Texas. But how are we going to get this done, right? That's the question. So somebody says medical and recreational. Yes, we're on the same page.
Jobs for the community. Here we go. You can make tax money. In 2020 in Oklahoma, they busted 50 million. I know, the millennium called me Pops, Rocky Mountain.
Thank you.
Let's do it for Texas, by Texas, for Texas.
Great point. And listen, I mentioned veterans a few times today. We know that veterans at the VA can be prescribed an opioid today. That's legal, and that can kill you. And it's killed a lot of people. That veteran who came back from Vietnam or came back from Afghanistan or just transitioned out and is now in civilian life, they cannot be prescribed cannabis at the VA, from which they will not die, and to which they cannot become addicted, and which may be the best way to treat their post-traumatic stress disorder or other symptoms or challenges they have after serving our country. So let's make sure that no veteran is a criminal for being able to take care of themselves. Let's no longer lock people up, and we're disproportionately locking up black and brown people, even though every kind of Texan uses marijuana.
I'm a vet and a cancer survivor.
Yes, sir.
And I did it on cannabis.
And real quick, to your question, how are we going to get this done? Listen, this is broadly popular, not just among Democrats, but independents, Republicans as well. And we can make this fiscal argument. It costs us $500 million a year to lock up people for possession of a substance that is legal in most of the rest of the country and most of the rest of the free world right now. When that person is locked up, so is their earning power and their ability to shoulder their fair burden of local property tax requirements here. When they get out of prison, they have to check a box on every employment application form saying they have a conviction. They're going to have a hard time being able to do what they otherwise would have been able to do over the course of their lives. And to the gentleman's point, the conservative estimate on taxing legal marijuana sales in Texas is another $500 million a year. So that's $1 billion to the positive if we do the right thing. So as governor, I'm going to try to make sure that we find that common ground to get it done and legalize marijuana in the state of Texas. There's a gentleman back here. Okay. I'm going to come back to you after this question. Thank you, sir.
I'm so sorry, we might be standing
You're
too close.
good.
Okay.
You're good.
Hi, thank you again for being here. It's a pleasure. As you may know, UHB is a minority serving institution, so a lot of our students do come from either first gen or don't know much about the college, the journey that it takes to graduate. My question for you is, I saw on your website talking about the loan forgiveness program, and can you touch a little bit on that and why it's so important for us as students to be aware as we are continuing our college journey here at UHB?
Great question. Thank you, Tiara. So one, we want to make sure that higher education, post-secondary training, whether you're getting a 4-year degree, an associate's degree, your certification to become a welder, that cost is no object, right? Because if you do better, all of us do better, right? I'm a big believer in that philosophy. I have faith that when we all do well, all of us do well. So how do we get this done? Texas actually used to have a program that would help those who wanted to pursue higher education to be able to fulfill in-demand, underserved needs in communities. And I'll give you an example. I was in Pecos County in Fort Stockton, and I met a young doctor there. And the only way he was able to afford medical school was through this program that used to exist in Texas. His local county went in half, the state of Texas went in half, and together they paid for him to be a doctor on condition that he come back to Fort Stockton and practice medicine for 6 years. Pretty good deal, right? When I met him, he was in his 8th year back in the community. He wasn't going anywhere. So for the bargain price of a medical school education, that underserved, primarily rural community gets a full-time doctor that was born and bred right there in Fort Stockton. I love that. As governor, I'm going to make sure that we institute that program again. And let's expand it to nurses, where we have 20,000 nurse shortage in the state of Texas. School teachers who are leaving the profession by the thousands today, and other in-demand, underserved parts of the state. So that's what we need to do. And then one quick note on Tiara and her leadership and the president's leadership here. Young people not only will benefit from this program, young people can make sure that we can actually implement it. When we showed up and met with young people here in Victoria and around this state in 2018, you all responded with record turnout. The voter turnout among young people in that election was up 504% from the previous midterm. So we need you to vote and volunteer and be engaged on this one so we can make it happen. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. My name is Carl Blood. I'm a Vietnam veteran, fire trooper, 82nd Airborne Division. And I know some of the people in El Paso. You know China Boy?
I sure do.
I know him well.
Yeah, I just saw him.
Man,
82nd Airborne in El Paso.
Special Forces also.
Yep.
I'm having lots of problems with some of these things going on in this country. I was born and raised a Democrat. My father said that Lyndon Baines Johnson made a Republican out of him. I served as fourth in the state legislature, on the legislative board of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers for many years. Jimmy Carter made a Republican out of me after I saw what happened on Desert One and all the inflation. Now you talk about education. You know, the federal government only pays 6% for education in the state of Texas. Taxpayers pay the rest. My wife taught for 31 years and she didn't need a second job. I didn't appreciate you saying that that people are getting guns, that everyone should have to register for a firearm. You can't buy a firearm in the state of Texas without filling out a federal form. They'll either flag you and you can't, whatever. Also, we have a huge problem with illegals in this country, and it's illegal according to the Constitution of the United States. We have to do something, because you talk education, how are we going to raise all the money to educate these kids that are here? And we have citizens' children that need to be educated. We do. Now,
I want to make sure we're respectful, even if we disagree.
Now.
Let's be respectful.
Yesterday, Kamala Harris was asking Poland, the Polish president, if the United States was willing to take refugees from Ukraine. She laughed. Never answered the question. So we know where that's at. But we got all this coming across this border that we're paying for excessively. You know, the oil and gas industry, we've been buying 10% of all the oil imported in from Russia. Russia is the people who are facilitating the Iran nuclear talks right now. And we want to, why would we want oil from Iran, who's our mortal enemy? Maduro, sanctions on them in Argentina. Hates the United States. We got a president and administration down there trying to negotiate oil and gas from Venezuela. Every time you put this oil and gas in a barge or a ship, you burn more oil with the ship, which also increases carbon in the atmosphere. So we need to get down to some real darn looking at what is right and what is wrong. And do you support CRT in our schools?
Oh, here we go.
It's all right, it's all right, it's all right.
Critical race theory.
So a couple things. First, I know that. Noah, can we work on that feedback? You got it? Okay. First, I know that everyone agrees that we are grateful to you for being here, for your service to our country, to your wife for her service to the community as a teacher. I actually think we probably agree, and you know, we can follow up later, but I think we agree on most of these issues. You said that nobody can buy a firearm in Texas without going through a background check. I want that to be the case. Right now, you can buy a firearm privately, and there's no background check. So, 8 people lost their lives in Midland, Odessa by a guy who tried to buy a firearm the way that you just described. You're absolutely right. Was unable to do this because of the background check, and then could legally in Texas buy from a private seller. Bought that gun, went out, and killed a bunch of people in Midland, Odessa. So, I think maybe we agree that there should be universal background checks, and I think that's a great start. I think we both agree that we should, if we need to, increase domestic production here in Texas, because you're right, I don't want to import oil from Venezuela. I don't want to import it from Iran for sure. I don't want to have to go to war or have anyone else's kids go to war to protect our supply line. So we agree there, and I want to make sure that we increase production in Texas. I want the jobs to be here as well. And I think you and I probably are both on the same page as well. We don't see CRT being taught in our schools right now. It's a course that is taught in law school. No, I don't think it should be taught in our schools. Yeah, I want to make sure. Look, folks, and a gentleman is asking a question that's on the minds of a lot of people here, so I'm glad he asked it. I want to make sure that when folks try to distract us or divide us on issues, like they're not teaching CRT in grade school right now. They may be teaching it in law school where it is appropriate, but they're trying to scare us about it nonetheless. I don't know why, but if we do get scared, we're not focused on reading retention or the fact that 7 out of 10 fourth graders are not reading at grade level in the average Texas classroom right now. Let's focus on that. Let's focus on those great teachers. Let's focus on those kids, their education, their mental health care. These are the big things I want us to get back to. So thank you for being here. Really appreciate your questions. Yes, sir. And then Cynthia.
Hello?
Hey there.
Okay. Hi, hi Beto. I'm Nancy from Port Lavaca, Texas. And I have some questions. So recently, in the past few years, we have been experiencing extreme weather phenomenons, like from Harvey and the winter storm from 2021. And through the winter weather events that we all experienced, the entire state shut down for a couple weeks or so. I was one of those who have survived Harvey and the winter storm. I have survived Harvey 2017 and the winter storm 2021. And throughout those times, I was like wondering, how could this happen when the energy and the electrical grid and all that should have been weatherized years ago. And I've been like trying to tell this to several politicians, even trying to send a letter to the current governor, Greg Abbott. I'm looking at you. I'm trying to be nice. Anyways, since that event, I've been like pins and needles to the point where I've been having some anxieties to where we're about to transition from the cold to the warm, and then in a couple of weeks we're gonna be preparing for the hurricane season. And lately there have been some reportings that I've been following through the past 10, 15, 20, even the past 50 years that we're gonna be experiencing some pretty scary weather events to where where I'm like wondering, are the energy, the grids and everything are gonna be prepared enough to where it can withstand these catastrophes to where we won't be struggling? Because I've talked to a number of people, including my own sister, who have seen firsthand that, you know, when the lights go off, it scares well, it doesn't scare me, it just gives me like an awakening, like how can I be sure if I'm gonna be safe and if I'm gonna be all right? So my question is this: what can you do as governor to make sure the lights are gonna stay on in 100-degree weather during the summer and 20 degrees weather in the winter? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. Yeah, this is one where Texas can figure this out, right? Not only are we the energy leader in the world and certainly in the country, but we know exactly why the grid failed. It wasn't the weather. It wasn't Mother Nature. It wasn't God. It was because we ignored the warnings that the grid was not winterized, as you just said earlier. And the major culprit in that was the gas supply. You literally had gas freezing at the wellhead. You had gas production completely offline, so you couldn't get it to the generators that spin off the electricity to power our homes. And the insult to injury is that after the winter storm last year, you still have not had the grid winterized, the gas supply weatherized to protect us from the next one, and you are paying more in every single utility bill, on average $45 more this month, this year, than you did last year, because the costs have been passed on to you. Y además, $11 billion was made, I would argue stolen, by energy company CEOs and corporations during 5 days when people were freezing to death here in the state of Texas. So as governor, you asked what we're going to do. We're going to winterize the gas supply. We're going to connect ERCOT to the nation's electricity grid so we can draw down power when we need it. We're going to get the $11 billion that was stolen from us back and return it to the ratepayer. We're going to ensure that there's an independent market monitor so that people can't go around charging 200 times the cost of gas, which is what Energy Transfer Partners did, Kelsey Warren's company, who then turned around and wrote Greg Abbott a $1 million campaign contribution check. So we are the victims of corruption and incompetence on an epic scale in the state of Texas, and the only way to make sure this doesn't happen again is to change those who are in power so we can guarantee the power comes back to the people. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And unfortunately, we're out of time, so this is
But
going
we're
to be...
so excited about this last one. This is going to be so good.
Our last question. Sorry if I wasn't able to get to you, but here we go.
Hi, my name is Wanda Carter Dyer, and I have a question for you. Give you a little background. Both of my grandparents were educators. They graduated from HBCUs, Prairie View A&M. I received my first graduate degree from Prairie View A&M in counseling. My last 2 degrees were from here at UHB. Go Jaguars.
Go Jaguars!
My question to you is this. Educators have really taken a hit this year. COVID has really stressed our teachers to an unbelievable level, as well as the parents and communities. What would you provide as a source of increasing their salaries, assistance programs when they are struggling through instances like COVID, and then also support to the communities that can help elevate education, because we know our students from 3rd grade are having issues with comprehension, reading, and basic writing.
Thank you for your career and for what you've done for the community and for asking this question. So we mentioned earlier, on average, the Texas teacher is underpaid by $7,500 from the average teacher nationally. So as governor, I want to get us up to at least parity with average, but we're Texans, and so we're never going to be satisfied with average. I want us to be superior to that, because not only do we have to attract these teachers, but we have to retain them. And to your point, 1/3 of Texas teachers leave the profession within the first 5 years. And when they asked Texas teachers this year 2/3 said that they are thinking about leaving the profession in 2022. So 1/3 plus 2/3 means not many teachers left over at the end of the day to teach our kids. In our school district, my wife got an email from the school saying, would you consider substitute teaching? I mean, just because she was a parent there, they were asking all parents. You have the resource officers and other part of the support staff being brought into the classrooms right now. Thank God they're willing to do that job, but this should be an alarm bell that we respond to and make sure that those teachers are paid enough, but also respected. And I hear far too often teachers talking about feeling as though they're under attack by their state government right now about what they can teach and how they can teach it, the high stakes standardized test, which the STAR test in Texas, folks, that is not the rule around the rest of the country. Texas is one of the last states that requires passage of the STAR to graduate from high school. The STAR is the only component of the A through F grade that a school gets. So we punish, in many cases, schools based on how those students perform. They just had 2 years of learning loss. They lost members of their families, and now we're going to hold that school accountable for how those kids learn right now. Let's relieve that pressure, and yes, we all think testing is important, but use it, and you could probably advise me better than I could advise everyone else, but use it as a diagnostic. Where do we need help? Let's push the resources there. Where is a teacher just knocking it out of the park? How do we replicate her example if it is applicable to other districts and other classrooms? So the only way we're going to get to all of this, by the way, is not some genius being in the governor's mansion. It's not a Democrat or Republican. It's by listening to teachers. You should be the person to guide the way. And as governor, I'm going to appoint an educator to be TEA commissioner in the state of Texas. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so this is the last announcement. After I have a chance to thank you all for having us out here. I want to thank Tiara for helping to kick us off and reminding us that young people are going to lead the way in this election. I want to thank Woodrow for his leadership and his incredibly kind words and the example that he's given to each of you for being here, asking these questions and participating, and to once again ask you to consider signing up and being a part of this campaign. All these great things that we talk about are only possible if we're willing to do the work to achieve them. And I know that we are a people who want to turn this hope and aspiration into action. So you can go to betofortexas.com, or we have volunteers throughout the room who will sign you up. And last thing, I'm going right over there next to that awesome UHV banner, where if you're interested, I would love to take a picture with you. And then I'm just going to ask you to post these pictures on your favorite social media platform so that we can prove that we were here together and get more people involved. Thank you, Victoria, for coming out today. Appreciate it.
Did you want to get your picture taken at there?
All right, we're going to be right in front of the Texas flag, right here.
Yep, Carl's still okay.
So we're going to do it right over here in about 10 to 15 minutes. It's going to be better.
Testing, 1, 2, hey. I'm so sorry, the people who have lined up over there, we'll give you pictures. Now, this way.